Overall tax revenue is expected to rise to between 37 and 38% of GDP by 27-28, and this is returning us to levels we haven't really seen since the 80s.
Pay rate's gone up, but why am I not seeing that matching benefit at the other end, at the net pay end?
Salary is a short-term satisfier. It's the benefits that the employer can provide and the value add that they can give that can obviously add the value in these harder times.
Good afternoon and hello everyone. Welcome to the March edition of Payroll Question Time. It's the end of the tax year, so we have a lot to cover. I'm Steve Yardley, Managing Director at JGA Recruitment. For anyone joining us for the first time, PQT is all about bringing together payroll experts to talk through what's happening in payroll right now, which is quite busy, and what it means in practice for payroll teams and their businesses. But most importantly, we want to hear your questions, so please do pop them in the chat. We've got a panel of experts here, so why wouldn't you? We're going to move to a little bit of housekeeping. I'll get through it as quickly as I can. Today's session is being recorded. The slides and content will be shared afterwards. And good stuff for today is at the end, there's a link for the SD Worx guide, Stay Ahead of the April 2026 Payroll Changes, of which there are quite a few, prepared with invaluable insight from our panellist, Simon Parsons. Thank you, Simon. This guide breaks down the key updates employers need to prepare before the new tax year. So a perfect companion for today's show. Just a quick reminder that today's discussion is guidance and opinion, because in payroll, there's rarely one right answer, as we all know. So usually at this point, I make reference to something that's happening in the wider world and global politics. However, considering the state of global politics, I'm going to shelter in a list of facts and figures about the topics we're covering today. I'm going to call it our statistical safe space. So first, looking at the stats, which I do love, so apologies in advance, tax thresholds and fiscal drag. So there's around 4 million more people that are going to be expected to be brought into the higher tax bands by 2028, largely due to the thresholds frozen. Income tax receipts are forecast to reach 329 billion this year, which is more than double what they were 15 years ago. That's in addition to my council tax bill that's just arrived, but that's another point. We'll skirt over that. Overall tax revenue is expected to rise to between 37 and 38% of GDP by 27-28. And this is returning us to levels we haven't really seen since the 1980s. Not really cheering you up, but anyway, we'll continue. Sickness and absence. UK employers lose roughly 185 million working days a year in sickness absence, which sounds huge. However, if we look across Europe, the UK sits much lower with an average of 4.4 days. So we could compare this to Germany with 18 days and a staggering 22 in Bulgaria. I have no idea what's happening in Bulgaria, but I will dig down maybe for the next session. And then EV schemes. So interesting stuff with EV registrations, 24% higher in 25 to 24. So there's 1 in 5 cars are now electric out on the road there. Probably makes sense given the looming petrol price increases. I tried not to talk about global politics, but there we are. Anyway, a few numbers to warm us up or cool us down, depending on your fuel bill. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Right, moving forward, let's move on and introduce our fantastic panel. First up, Simon Parsons, Director of UK Compliance at SD Worx. Hi, Simon.
Yeah, hi, Steve, and hi, everybody. It's good to be with you again this month. As you say, UK Compliance Director, SD Worx. I've been in the industry since 1984. I know, look far too young. I have the Master of Science in Payroll Management with the CIPP, University of Westminster, the original cohort that did the Masters, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Paraprofessionals. Happy to sit with, beside Richard and Sam. I've known them for a long time. We've been on lots of HMRC committees and groups and other government department committees and groups together. And we'll see how today goes. But good to meet you as well, Steve. Welcome back. This must be third, is it now?
I think it's third time. Third time's the charm, right? And as you said, thank you. We've got Richard George also with us today, Payroll Compliance and Operations Consultant extensive knowledge and expertise in all things payroll. Hi, Richard.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm a year less than Simon, because I'm in 1985. Obviously, I look a lot younger than Simon, because that year made a lot of difference in relation to how the world is. Every facet of payroll in my career, Reward 300, and as Simon Carter said, and have been involved in numerous supporting functions within the industry.
Thank you, Richard. And Samantha from Armstrong and Watson. Hi, Samantha.
Hello there. Hello. I'm beginning to feel very old. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Richard. I first worked in wages, as it was referred to back then, in 1980 when I left school. I know I don't look old enough, I know, but I'm really feeling very old now. And so pretty much have been in payroll ever since. And I've been very fortunate to work in a number of really exciting and interesting jobs. The policy team at the CIPP was an amazing eye-opener. I joined them thinking I knew it all and discovered I knew very little. So, nothing quite like joining the policy team to realise that. And more recently, I've been with Armstrong Watson LLP. We are across the north, a firm of an accountants, financial advisors, and we run a payroll service. And my job is to support the payroll team. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that with training and mentoring and coaching. So I'm seeing the new generation of payroll professionals come through, and it's an absolute privilege to work with them. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Sam. So we've got a great mix of compliance, operational, policy expertise on the panel today. Please do use them. Get those questions coming through, and don't be shy. If you're wondering about something, chances are around half the audience are as well. So get the questions coming through. And let's go through, I'll do a quick run through of agenda today and what we'll be covering, starting with the new tax year changes coming in April. We're going to move through to the Employment Rights Act and the developments around that as that ongoing piece goes forward. We're going to run a poll around sickness changes, how we're prepared for that, and how people feel about that. And then we will cover the latest on the pensions updates. And after that, we're going to move through to EV and hybrid car salary sacrifice schemes. I'm amazed I got that in one go. And of course, time for questions. So without further ado, shall we have a look at the new tax year? Let's start with that because it's probably what most payroll teams are focused on right now. And there's a few areas that we need to cover on this. And shall we start with the start for 10 Scottish income tax changes? Does anyone want to start on that one for us?
Well, I'll start on that one because I think Scotland have provided us. Sorry, Simon. Simon opened his mouth there and I jumped in. Apologies. Just simply because Scotland really is the only UK nation this year, or in this coming tax year, that's proposing any changes to any of its bands, and it has enough to pick from. And starting changing the end date or end rate to the starter checklist. What's wrong with me? I just need to practice talking and I'll get there. So the starter rate band is expanding to 3,967, which of course means the basic rate band will start at 3,968 and extend through to 16,956. So again, an extension there, which has a knock-on effect on the intermediate rate band. No change to the higher or the advanced or top rates, which are going to be frozen until the 28-29 tax year. Scotland Parliament claims it has the most progressive tax system in the UK and ensures that those with the broadest shoulders pay the highest amount of tax, which is true of all of the UK nations. We have a progressive tax system. The more you earn, the more you pay. Well, that's all I've got on Scotland. I'm sure Simon's got a lot more to add to that.
I was thinking that kind of gives Scotland the claim of both ends, doesn't it? So they can get first prize and third prize. So they're the lowest tax organisation in the country for those who are low paid. They're the highest tax collectors for those who are the higher paid. So they win at both ends. Is that right? The lowest and the highest.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the highest. It's obviously the growth every year is taking into account those who don't pay tax at all. And that's obviously their big marketing stream, which they sort of drive on every year, is taking more people out of tax. And it kind of takes you into the second item on the list, which is, everywhere else we're seeing a far higher, I guess, fiscal drag, which you mentioned earlier on, Steve. So where we're seeing that drag due to the variation, in Scotland, it is always good news for the low paid. But I guess that's all relative to the amount that people earn, given national minimum wages increasing and alike. But as again Simon said, as you move to the higher echelons of taxation, the difference is pretty substantial, given there is that intermediate, higher and further rates from £75,000 out up there, which will significantly, and it's thousands per year, make a difference to those higher paid people. So it's a very different regime.
It's quite interesting because I was digging down on the facts. I haven't got them now, but the percentage of that comes from the higher band in the UK, I'm not talking about Scotland, is quite serious, like as in the contribution to that 329 billion. So there's a lot you could look at in those statistics and how that works. But anyway, I wish I'd done a bit more. But
well, no, and I'm just picking up on the comment about the fiscal drag. I mean, what we see as a result of that, or are likely to see, is a greater number of questions from clients, from employees who are saying, well, hang on a minute, and pay rate's gone up, but why am I not seeing that matching benefit at the other end, at the net pay end? And of course, it's because more of them have been pulled in, as your statistics reflected, more of them being pulled either into the basic rate tax band for the first time, or those going from the basic rate into the higher rate, so paying a proportion of their tax at the higher rates than they might otherwise have done, which of course provides a challenge for employers who are looking to reward their employees appropriately, but don't actually want to increase their tax burden anymore, because employees are going to kick back at that. So I think we're going to start to see, wherever possible, a little bit more imagination coming into tax planning, I think, for employers and employees, which I think the government, in fairness, and HMRC have probably predicted, and as we will discuss as we go on, I'm sure.
I think you're right, Sam, and I think it's twofold, because firstly, I guess, is that variation, but the second thing, obviously, is also employers' NI. With the increase to employers' NI, the net effect of remuneration has obviously increased fairly dramatically for some. So, as you quite rightly said, where do you find the value add? And I think we've probably said a million times on here, salary is a short-term satisfier. It's the benefits that the employer can provide and the value add that they can give that can obviously add the value in these harder times. Because the value of the product isn't changing. Thankfully, I guess national insurance is lower for the employee. But again, it's just that drag of the taxation that it can bring.
Indeed.
And I guess we got the fiscal drag is pushing more and more people up to the fact that they're losing their tax-free allowances. So those earning over 100,000, that number must be increasing every year in numbers quite significantly, I should think. It's certainly the query, because that's a little bit of the tax shock that we see lots of questions from in my area, because people will say, I used to earn 98,000, I've now earned 120,000, had a bonus, and then suddenly I've got thousands of pounds tax bill, and you've lost your tax-free allowance. It's been eradicated or removed, it's reduced down to zero. So all that £12,579, whatever that you had tax-free, you now owe tax on it, potentially at the highest rate as well, because that's where it'll hit in the differential. And people say, well, why didn't payroll take care of that? Or why didn't payroll warn me? Or such questions. And the reality is, it's not a payroll calculation. It's not allowed to be. It's an HMRC self-assessment activity, and it's on an annualized basis as well. So you'll get that drag of demand late. And then, of course, they'll hit you in your standard current earnings as well. So they want the bill for the year they didn't know you earned over 100,000. They want the bill for this year as well. So you get it twice. So it's just looking after that. And of course, in Scotland, you've got that effect as well, because they've got the double increase and the reduction of free pay that comes into play. But so all part of the fun. And then, of course, if you've been a student and gone to university, you're going to have a 9% or 6% tax as well, on top of a debt that you're probably never going to pay off. In some cases, I'm not saying for the higher paid, but certainly for the lower paid, the interest rising and application to the loan is higher than the few £100s you've paid off as extra tax liability.
I think it's quite interesting and probably quite key is the whole freeze is turning into a very, I guess, easy political option for the government now. Because remember, we should be coming out of it this year based on the original decision. So if we go back to the original forecast by the Conservatives, the original freeze, it was due to finish April 2026. We're now minimum 28, 29, but who's to say, depending on the state of play, that won't continue further and further and further, which is quite concerning. It's become very easy politically.
Indeed. And I mean, with the announcement that actually it is going to extend till 2031, we will be in a new government by then, maybe even in the second new government, the way politics seems to work these days. So at that point, all bets are off, or all bets are on. But you're absolutely right, Richard. It's a very easy win for a chancellor who doesn't want to become as unpopular as she did last year when she changed employer thresholds and employer rates. You do nothing, which grabs the headlines as being a good news story, and certainly from an administrative burden, it's a good news story. But actually, it will raise as much for the Treasury as it would have done by kind of raising the tax rate or changing the threshold. So and yet it's a good news story.
A rise without announcing one. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because when we hear those budget headlines, we don't think, that's good. That's good. Because I can still remember a time when tax rates did go up at budgets, and they hit you the following month. So at that level, it can be a good news story, but as I say, it's that hidden cost that it has to the individual who's paying tax.
I guess you've got the issue.
Sorry, interesting. Because they announced the deficit in January, didn't they? And it was very positive. However, I get the distinct feeling with external conditions that may change drastically. So hard fought and easily lost, right?
Yeah. So I guess the other change affecting us in April, which we've kind of touched on, because it affects everyone's taxation, is the introduction of Student Loan Plan 5. And I guess an effect of that for some will be because those studying for postgraduate certificate in education, become teachers, etc., they'll have been used to a Plan 2 or a Plan 1 threshold. They've gone on and studied further. That Plan 5 wouldn't have been collected so far. They'd have been paying Plan 2 or Plan 1 for their student loans already. Will suddenly in April revert to a lower threshold than they used to with a Plan 5 collection, because that Plan 5 loan will take priority over everything. So I guess the intention of talking about Plan 5 starts 6th of April, £25,000 threshold annual. It takes priority. So all of those that join you don't declare what student loan plan they're on, but they have one, you're required to put them on Plan 5, which again goes back with the devolved government sort of discussion, is sort of start a checklist. If you don't know what your tax code is, or what you are English, Northern Irish employee, even if you lived in Wales or Scotland and never left, unless you get a tax coding from the revenue. And if you think you had a student loan, but you don't know what plan type it was, they'll put you on English Plan 5, even if you've never left Scotland. So if you know it's Plan 4, declare Plan 4. But if you don't declare anything, you'll pay Plan 5 until HMRC catches up and notifies it. So that's a transitional change we all have in payroll, is that the starter checklist changes. The assumptions are no longer Plan 1 or whatever it is. It's now Plan 5 from 6th of April. Have we changed our software processes to ensure that we're doing it correctly? And ideally, the starter checklist actually changed that you only select one. The old starter checklist was you could select all of them that you have, and then you magically needed to know which one was the top priority. Now they're asking them to only select one. Then you say, how on earth do they know? Well, apparently if they go on their account, student loan account, it'll tell them which one to tick. But that's all palaver, isn't it, for us to do and get used to as we go into the new year. So new Plan 5 with the new starter checklist, again with selection of correct tax codes, etc.
Yeah.
Sorry if I moved off Scotland.
Yeah, and indeed, and I mean the starter checklist has changed. It is now published, isn't it? So that employers and employees can access it and use it accordingly. And whilst the guidance has changed to say, just as Simon said, only select one plan, they can also select the postgraduate plan, of course, because that runs concurrently. Yeah. But if they do happen to choose multiple plans, because the boxes are there to tick, and they, oh yes, I've got one of those, I've got one of those, and I've got one of those as well, then the employer needs to know that they just go with the default plan, which is going to be Plan 5, as that's got the lowest threshold. So, which again means that employees are going to be repaying more than they might necessarily need to. But on the subject of student loan plans, Plan 2 is going to be frozen after this year's increase for 3 years from next year, from April next year. So.
Thank you, guys. So moving on to statutory payments.
So I'll start this one. So with a lot of statutory payments historically, it's been based on national insurance thresholds. So the LEL, but obviously that varies this year because of the change to sickness. But for everything else, the LEL still represents the start point. And that's gone up to £129. Is that right? Off the top of my head.
No, 109.
From the 6th.
Oh, sorry.
129. Yes.
Ignore LEL.
The principal two, I'd say the principal two are obviously for most employers, sickness and parental leave. So we're talking again the good old inflationary increases. So SSP goes from 118 to 123.25, which is obviously going to be very important this year with the transition to the new sickness rules, which I'm sure we're talking about. The parentals goes up to 194.32. Off the top of my head, so I've done well today. Brain's in a good place. Good with numbers. So fairly static, normal state of play, but obviously the key difference is first of all the variation to statutory bereavement and alike, and the day one rights. But again, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But obviously the big one now becomes the notional value of SSP against the new rules from the 6th of April, because obviously with the LEL now no longer in play, the 80% now has to be achieved to a higher level than it did last year for it to be payable at the full rate. So some fairly key, I guess, understandings this year about what is a fairly static normally event in that respect. But as we already said, when it comes to all the other aspects of national insurance and tax, we are as we are, other than that lower earnings limit.
Thank you, Richard. Then we had a piece of general change. Sure.
Yeah, I can't remember what general change was necessarily, but
a bit where we could
Anything else? Maybe we thought something else would come out in the news for April, but just a reiteration on the statutory payments. Statutory payments for SMP, well, Parental, are from Sunday the 5th. We get lots of queries in because people have started their maternity period on a Saturday. So the week starting the 4th of April is paid at the old rate, because it's only for weeks that start on the Sunday, the 5th, and then we'll say, oh, but you can start on any day, so it shouldn't matter. Well, unfortunately, the rate is set by the start of the week, and it applies to all 7 days of that week, no matter what day they choose. So Sundays still have some historic impact on the rate paid. So in April, you may have weeks that are part old, part new, as in whole weeks, not part weeks. If you're paying in part period or part weeks, the rate is the same for each half. It doesn't change. It's set by that start point of the week. Sorry if that sounded complicated. Hopefully your software takes care of it for you. Ours does. So, and hopefully yours does. But sometimes I know people try and work these things out automatically. And what we haven't talked about is national minimum wage yet. Do we have that later in the?
I think we've got that slide, haven't we?
Is that on the Employment Rights Act? Of course
Yes.
it is, because the Fair Work Agency. That's we'll come back to that.
And next up, next up we've got the last chance saloon I've got on the screen, but the final preparation. Payroll benefits in kind. I've been more sort of circumspect, but last chance saloon for payroll benefits in kind.
Yeah, so if you want to payroll benefits in kind 2026, you must have registered at the very latest, the 5th of April. I suggest you register beforehand. That results in HMRC revising everybody's tax code to remove the benefits that you indicate are being payrolled. I think because it's a good year to prepare for 27, and it will be different in 27. Let's point that out, payrolling. But you'll have sorted out many of your processes with getting your benefit values. Interesting statistic that I've heard from negotiations I've been having with the HMRC, because we're heavily involved with discussions with them. Can't really say too much. 93% of all benefits relate to medical and cars that are returned to HMRC. So a lot of the complexities of PBIC only relate to 7% of benefits that are received. And so we'll see what happens in the world. But give it a go for 26 if you've got time, although it is a bit late.
It's no consolation.
April payment.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
So excited to be here. I just can't stop putting in. Sorry, Simon, you carry on.
That's all right. Yes. I'm just thinking, if you're a late April payment, you've probably got a little bit of time to prepare, but not much. If you're an early April payment, I think you're probably a bit late, but go for it if you can, especially if your benefits are simple.
So I think it's quite interesting as well, some of the mentalities towards the reasoning for payrolling this year. A lot of people are saying, well, if I do it now, I won't have to worry about it next year. And I think I mentioned last time we were on this call, I was with a big firm of financial business who were totally uninterested in the mandatory process because they already payroll. And it's just, there's a lot of ignorance as to the differences that we're going to see in 26, 27. So, yeah,
absolutely. But either way, I think whether you have chosen to go early or choose to go early or decide to leave it until it's mandatory, this next year shouldn't be wasted. As as Simon said, make sure you're getting your house in order. Do the people in payroll communicate with the people who complete the P11Ds? In my experience, they don't always. So, the people who are going to need to know what benefits are being provided to their employees, to their colleagues, to their clients, employees, that all needs to come out of the woodwork in this coming year, so that everybody's clear on what they need to be reporting. The process, as Simon said, is going to change with mandatory payrolling. Hopefully for the better, but I very much doubt that. But nevertheless, an employer can control what they currently do and consider how that's going to need to change when mandatory payrolling comes in.
I think the real value as well at the moment is getting employees used to having it payrolled. So, it's not going to mean you're out of the woods for 2026 by any stretch of the imagination, but at least employees there, even if you're not payrolling everything, you're getting employees into the habit and reducing the impact on them, which I think is a good thing.
And depending on how big the employer is, they've got a big communication piece with their employees to help them to understand how the taxation of their benefits in kind is going to change, what the short-term hit might be, not necessarily will be, but might be, and how things are going to look on the payslip, and answer any questions or concerns that the employees might have. So for a large company that's spread across the UK, that could be a very big communications piece. So it isn't just sorting out the practicalities of what do we currently, pick and what don't we, and how will we process that, communicate that to payroll, but it's communicating with the employees to help them to understand what change is coming about. And now it won't be because the employer has chosen to change it. It's because the government has said, right, now is the time. Mandatory payrolling is here and it's here to stay. I can't help but think, the biggest winners here are going to be the HMRC, because they're not going to have those P11Ds to complete going forward. So we can't lose sight of that. But I'm edging into politics there, and I won't do that.
That's my job.
There's also obviously the sensible attitude that you remove the reactive taxation of staff finally in the majority of cases, which is key. The whole point of RTI was to do exactly that. You hear the statistics before RTI of the multi-million adjustments at year end, which a lot of which we've lost, in inverted commas, and it's principally taxing people when they earn on everything. So, there's value add, of course, there is.
I think as someone who's had his benefits payrolled since 2016, do I worry about this at all or even pay much attention? There's absolutely no need to be honest. It just happens. It doesn't affect my self-assessment return because it's got nothing to do with self-assessment anymore. I don't get a tax bill shock in 18 months after I've had a benefit. It's all real, so it just happens as and when.
Yeah. So again, that comes into the communications. It's putting employees' minds at rest, but also pointing out the benefits to them as individuals. So, and I'll move away from HMRC being the biggest winners. I'm butchering. I'm sorry. So people have until what was it, midnight on the 5th, Simon, to register for voluntary payrolling if they are so inclined.
Yeah.
So.
I had a separate question come in for, I think, back to Richard, is the LEL still fixed at 24-25 level for auto-enrolment qualifying earnings band?
It's not an LEL. The LEL refers to national insurance, but the lower threshold remains frozen for pensions auto-enrolment. I think
I was going to say, principally they were originally linked to the lower and upper earnings limit, but they are the lower qualifying earnings band and the upper qualifying earnings band. So
I think we are going to touch on pensions a little bit more, I think, as we go through.
I thought I'd address it now, but thank you, guys. So should we move through to Employment Rights Act? I've got quite a lot to cover on this one. So alongside those tax year changes, another big payroll area teams are looking at is the Employment Rights Act, as we are fully aware. There's a number of areas developing here. And obviously, I suppose from what I hear, the first one is the Fair Work Agency. Love the title. And thoughts on this, guys?
Yeah, well, the shock announcement this morning, I'm allowed to say that. A precursor to the Fair Work Agency, of course, is the 389 employers named and shamed this morning.
Yeah.
One of which includes one of the big four accountancy firms. I won't name here, someone else can if they wish. There are others as well, so there's some big names named. Football clubs as well, so there's a few football clubs in there, along with traditional other types of industries. But interesting. I'm going to say at the CIPP conference last year, when I attended the national minimum wage session there, employer kind of said, or representative, we're okay, we're national living wage employers. And the fellow said, well, that's interesting because we've just penalised 18 of those because they fail national minimum wage. So I think there's an element of look at the naming list. Well, I don't think for the names. It's actually called, is it Bulletin 30? I can't remember which one it is now.
Yeah, it's around 23. Yeah.
It gives out the reasons. So 157 were due to reductions. So that's things like charging them for parking, meals, stock or till shortage, training costs, saving schemes, uniform, childcare, salary sacrifice schemes, etc. Worker purchase of clothes to meet the dress code. So those are reasons why people have failed, not their hourly pay rate. It's that because minimum wage is judged on what you receive, not what you're paid. And then the second one was 130 was unpaid working time. So the amount on social media we see of people having to do training courses at home, compulsory, which are unpaid or etc., is incredible. Rounding of clock time, 15 minutes to your late 5 minutes, so we'll dock 15 minutes off your timesheet. We require you to be here 15 minutes before opening. You've got to stay 15 minutes till after, but we're not paying you for that. We only pay you. All those things are 130 of them. Failures, apprenticeships are the other one. So sorry, I've skipped into national minimum wage more than anything on this, but it's all falling under the Fair Work Agency from the 7th of April this year. 71 failure to apply the correct rate to apprentices. The other thing about apprentices often when they undertake inspections is they find that a lot of people with the name apprentice are not apprentices at all. They're just underpaid workers that you've called it, and actually they're not undertaking any formal accredited training at all. And then there's the uprated, so change of age, and etc. And it really starts to drop down. So they're all very much traditional. And often I think when I talk about national minimum wage, which is quite a lot, and talk even in business settings with people, there is a misconception that the national minimum wage is about an hourly rate of pay. It sort of is, but it isn't. It's not about an hourly rate of pay. It's about the rate of pay someone receives for all working time, whether you pay it or not. And that's the risk area that people have not got or understood. With the national living wage, it is about not national living wage, the real living wage. It's about the pay rate. That's all they judge. For national minimum wage law, they don't. It's all working time divided into qualifying earnings. I'm going to call it qualifying earnings because not all earnings qualify for national minimum wage purposes, minus any deductions or reductions or salary sacrifice. Divide all the working time, whether it's paid or not, into that. Have they paid above the rate? And that's where people are falling down because quite often they haven't, even as a real living wage employer. they haven't met the legal requirements, because the real living wage couldn't care less whether you've got a salary sacrifice scheme, etc. in play. So sorry, sort of hijacked a little bit on the national minimum wage. Others may want to come in, but the Fair Work Agency are then expanding. Well, they take on all the other labour laws and agencies that come into force, but they're then expanding, and we've here a number of months now that the minimum wage audit team of HMRC have had training in holiday pay law. That then expands at some time into holiday pay. And the government, of course, are conscious that 1.7 million workers in the UK are still denied their holiday pay rights, never mind the millions more that aren't being paid the correct amount in accordance with the legislation. I'm not saying the legislation is easy, because it's complex and it's actually really quite confusing. But and then they also expand to sickness. But I'll let some of the others talk about the Employment Rights Act, because there are other things coming into play, like extra parental leave rights, day one rights. Lots of people are a bit confused on that because they think there's payment associated with some of those. There isn't. It's just a leave right. But yeah, I'm going to point at Sam or Richard. I don't mind. Come in.
Sam, ladies first.
Oh, okay. Well, just to pick up on what you were talking about with the paternity pay and paternity leave and unpaid parental leave. So previously there has been a period of time that needs to be served before an employee becomes eligible for just to take the leave. But both of those are becoming day one rights, which is good. Doesn't affect the pay. The pay eligibility criteria remains the same for paternity leave. Paternity pay, get them the right way round, and obviously parental leave, which is a maximum of 18 weeks for a child from birth through to 18 years old. That's a maximum of 18 weeks, and it's per employee, or per child, not per employment. So an employer needs to be able to, if an employee comes to them to ask if they can take parental leave, which is unpaid, unless the employer chooses to be more generous, then the employer needs to be able to reconcile whether or not an employee has already taken an amount of leave. They can take a maximum of 4 weeks in any 1 year, to a total maximum across the child's life up to the age of 18 weeks. And it needs to be taken in blocks of a week, unless the child has a disability, in which case it can be taken in days. But again, it's that leave entitlement is becoming a day one right, as opposed to requiring that period of time being served, which was a year for the parental leave, and 26 weeks into the qualifying week, if my memory serves me right, in terms of paternity leave. So yeah, both of those are positive. But just to flip back to the Fair Work Agency, as little as we know, it's an executive agency of the Department of Business and Trade. It's, as Simon said, bringing together a lot of the enforcement agencies, HMRC with national minimum wage, statutory sick pay. HMRC have had a statutory payments dispute team for many a long year. But the Fair Work Agency are going to, I suspect, be taking a slightly more aggressive approach to policing statutory sick pay and then making sure that the payment is being made more accurately. And I think we're going to talk about statutory sick pay changes in a little bit more detail, and holiday pay. Now, because of just in advance of that, the record keeping requirements and obligations on an employer now are extending so that records need to be kept for 6 years. And I think we're going to start, I may be wrong on this, and I hope I am, but we're going to start to see a government department defining the legislation for holiday pay in a way that maybe many employers haven't done. And I know Simon can talk for a long time on the subject of holiday entitlement and pay. But I think we're going to have a bit of an eye opener with holiday pay enforcement in a very similar way to what we've had with national minimum wage over this last few years. What I would just like to finish with on the subject of national minimum wage. This is the first time I've looked at a naming list for a long time. And again, when I was fortunate enough to work on the policy team, the one thing that I lobbied hard for, together with Simon and many other interested parties, was for the naming list not just to name and shame. Anyone can do that, but also to educate. And I've been quite impressed actually with how the education bulletin has expanded to include a lot of detail into where the employers have gone wrong, and how they could have not gone wrong. So that's just an observation from me, who's not been keeping up to date really with the naming lists. But having a look at it today, I was really quite impressed with that. So worth a look if you're still unsure on whether or not you are totally up to date on how national minimum wage rules work. It's worth taking a look at that. There's lots of useful links that take you to further guidance. So worth looking at.
We're digging down on
Probably more to add on national minimum wage, probably more on the other two. So obviously holiday pay is coming into the Fair Work Agency, but I think something I've seen a lot of leverage on fairly recently is average holiday pay, and that could therefore take you back into the world of Fair Work Agency. So I've done quite a lot of work with a couple of providers, and they're getting a lot of people taking advantage of the average holiday pay, which is great and it's fine, but it's more the case of justification of the amounts being offered. It becomes another area that requires auditable calculation and visibility, not only to the employer but to possibly the payroll provider as well. It's very easy saying, well, pay them 8 hours over to 8 hours holiday this week. Well, is that historic? Is that for this week? Is that for a previous period? And what is it actually related to? So I think there's going to be quite a lot said, possibly when the Fair Work Agency get moving, about the auditable requirement, because it kind of becomes another national minimum wage thing, where national minimum wage is auditable against work hours, pay, so on and so forth. Well, given the increase in average holiday usage now, especially with the options available, such as rolling holiday up, is how accurate is the payments being made? Is it auditable? Do you have enough information to be able to justify the amounts you're paying related to again, just like national minimum wage, the genuine hours the individual is working and the actual pay that they're receiving? So a little bit to the side, but I think it's a really important area, and I think it's going to get quite a lot of leverage in the next year in relation to it.
Well, holiday pay is a real focus on some of the social media, UK employment law sites and payroll. There's obviously still significant misunderstandings of what it is, even with the relaxations that came in 2024. I'll call them relaxations, the alternate method for irregular and part-year workers of hours accrual and rolled up holiday pay. There's been a query yesterday even of an employee who's being told that he doesn't accrue hours when he goes on holiday, or she, and the employer obviously doesn't understand the regulations, because they do, because you're meant to take the 52-week hours average and accrue on that basis for when they're on leave. But they're being told they don't get anything, they only get that when they work. And so there's quite common misunderstandings on even the new methods of hours accrual and rolled up holiday pay and the protections. And I guess that goes in with the new sickness as well. because rolled up holiday pay will be on top of the sickness pay if you're paying it and things like that. So just be careful on the methods, etc. I'm sure we'll hear more. I actually think holiday pay law is a mess. I'm hoping that as the Fair Work Agency come in and start to audit people, they'll understand that the law is a mess and needs to be improved greatly. But we'll see what happens. The other fear is it won't. They'll just make it worse. But there we go. Does that lead us in?
Right. So, sorry, Simon.
Go on.
No, it's quite funny that I've been teaching payroll for a decade, and I opened up holiday pay 10 years ago with holiday pay as a mess, and it hasn't really changed. It's just been piggybacked. So if you go back 10 years, and we're talking about the days of British Gas against the guy, all of those kind of cases that came out back then, and the confusion and upset around what holiday pay should be calculated. All they've done, it seems, is built addendums and alterations on top of what was already broken to create what we've got today. And it's almost you almost want somebody to get rid of it all and start all over again. But obviously that will never happen.
No, I mean, one of the things, one of the powers that the Fair Work Agency are going to have is that they are going to be able to bring about tribunal processes against an employer rather than the employee having to do that on their own. So we might see even more complexity, because half the reason holiday pay is such a mess when it comes to the legislation is because case law has had such an impact over the years, with various rulings sort of changing the direction from one discussion to another on how holiday pay or what is included in holiday pay. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how the Fair Work Agency use those powers that they will have. And also, will it be, regardless of what the employee thinks, even if the employee doesn't want to take an employer to the tribunal, will they still have the power to, well, we think they've done wrong, so we're going to do that for you. So we've been assured they're launching on the 7th of April, at which point I hope we'll know a lot more about them than we do at the moment. But they're going to be coming in phases in terms of the services that they're going to be rolling out. But they are going to have extensive powers. There's no doubt about that. So I think it's watch this space. But in the meantime, maybe do a bit of an audit on your holiday pay, some minimum wage. Just if you haven't already done one recently, do another one or do one, because I think being prepared and having clear and concise records is going to be an employer's defence going forward. So.
Well, the law's changed, hasn't it, a little? So it's moved from what were civil offences to make it potentially criminal offences.
Yeah.
And the Fair Work Agency is staffed by, as in, this is HMRC.
Matthew Taylor at the moment.
Sorry?
Matthew Taylor at the moment.
I asked this last time and I was really worried it was a stupid question, and it still might be. But that was the thing. It was like, I remember obviously going through where I got my grey hair, which was GDPR. Well, that was the beginning of it, but and then how that would be, sort of policed, as it were. So it's still my question. We still don't know the answer, right?
Well,
I guess it's pretty. I was going to say, I guess they're taking the place of a job that 3 departments currently do. So you would suspect that there'll be a certain amount of, I guess, reworking of roles in those areas into the new Matthew Taylor team.
Well, Matthew Taylor is the chair, isn't he? The CEO. I forget the name of the young lady. well, she might be an old lady, actually. She might not be a young lady, but she is going to be the CEO, or is the CEO of the Fair Work Agency. And I would imagine that the team are already there working hard, but it's actually going to be launched on the 7th of April. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that Easter's fallen over the change of the tax year. Certainly, when we look at all of the examples that the Department for Work and Pensions have provided for how statutory sick pay is going to work in the transition, we have to, I think, conveniently overlook the fact that we've gone from Monday to Friday qualifying days to Friday to Saturday to Sunday, whatever that fits with the examples that the Department for Work and Pensions want to give. Is this a nice inroad into the subject of statutory sick pay? I'm sure
seamless.
seamless.
Absolutely.
For the first time today. I think you'll have had to have been up a mountain or down in a cave not to have caught the headlines for the changes that are coming about as a result of the Employment Rights Act 2025. So statutory sick pay, for the first time, we are going to say goodbye to the period of incapacity to work, which is 4 continuous calendar days. They don't have to be working days. They just have to be 4 of them, and they have to be continuous. We're also seeing the end to, as Richard said earlier, the lower earnings limit as eligibility criteria. So every employee, once they have done even a little bit of work for their employer, will be eligible for statutory sick pay on their first full qualifying day of incapacity. So for the first time, we've got 2 rates of statutory sick pay. We're going to have an 80% of average weekly earnings, or the standard rate of £123.25, whichever is the lower. And so from the 6th of April, that is how the change is going to look. A lot of things haven't changed with statutory sick pay, but they're the main headline grabbers, and they are, of course, fundamental parts of the statutory sick pay scheme that was introduced back in 1983. What's interesting, of course, is that whilst there's going to be a lot of winners as a result of these changes, i.e. a lot more employees are going to be able to claim statutory sick pay from day one, there are going to be, in the short term, potential losers. And so transitional protections have been brought in for employees who are off sick before the end of the tax year and still off sick as we go into the new tax year. And they are going to be earning in the region of £125 to £154.05, I think is the quoted figure. And potentially they could lose out by going from the standard rate of 118.75 as it is now to the new rate of 123.25. So they have been afforded protection until they come back to work, or they go on maternity leave, stop having statutory sick pay, go into their maternity exclusion period, or they exhaust their 28 weeks entitlement. And I'm assuming, though I haven't seen it specified, I'm assuming that also includes the 3 years of linked periods. So I'm looking at Simon. Simon might know the answer to that. But I haven't seen that, but I have to assume that would be the case. And there's a 4th reason, and I've forgotten what it is at the moment. Simon will be able to jump in.
There's the whole issue of linked sicknesses before and after as well. It's
Right.
probably the other key thing. And I think it is that, I guess, short-term pain is the scenario at the moment, because there is this, I guess, transitional period that is not forever, but I guess it's depending on software and service and procedure, how, if at all, automated that's going to be. Because I hear I'm sure, Simon, you're the same. There are very different products and very different service options depending on your provider as to the management of those transitional rules. Because you mentioned a lot of them there, Sam, but another great example being linked sicknesses. If you weren't eligible before, but you are eligible now, it's still the original sickness criteria in relation to the amount that's being calculated that is being used on the new applicable. So there's a number of key caveats, to use a horrible word, that an employer's got to get their head around if they haven't already very quickly, that could be running for, well, anything up to 8 weeks from the 6th of April because of that linking period as well. So you're quite right. There is, if you're sick before and you were receiving the full amount of SSP, but under the new scheme you're not because of your rate of pay, then obviously you are protected for the period of that sickness should it go past the 6th of April. But as you say, then that's that. So it's quite complex. If you have I guess, especially a weekly payroll, high turnover payroll, large headcount payroll, that there could be some fairly difficult transitional administrative tasks that are going to be needed prior to going into the business normal, along with, and again, we go back to the previous couple of subjects, communication is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Communication. I mean, if you're in a bureau, then communication with the clients, because do the clients even appreciate how their sickness absence might have to change? How are they currently policing their sickness absence? Because it's going to be employees who will be entitled from day one of their sick leave. What do they know? What their qualifying day patterns are? Are they consistent? Are they accurate, and have they been communicated and agreed with their employees? So are they in the staff handbook, or are they in the particulars of employment? So all of that are things that the employer needs to be thinking about now. I mean, thankfully, guidance has started to dribble out on gov.uk, but it's only just dribbling out from yesterday, and that's the 18th of March, and this comes in the 6th of April. So, bless them, we're going to love them, but they're not giving us a lot of notice. I know software developers quite rightly have been given guidance, but actually that transitional guidance that's been issued, for 3 versions of it by the Department for Work and Pensions, hasn't been shared on gov.uk. It's only been shared with software developers, and it's only thanks to those, thank you Simon, for sharing those versions, that we've been able to see any information outside of any changes to legislation. And I know it's the gov.uk way, but nevertheless, when you've got significant change like this, that change that for people who, particularly who've worked in payroll for a very long time and know the statutory sick pay scheme inside out, these are big changes to get your head around. They don't seem big, but they are big. So, whilst that a lot hasn't changed, a lot has, and that what has is fundamental to it goes to the heart of statutory sick pay. So, I think the sooner people working in payroll particularly get to know this and understand those changes, the better. So,
yeah. So DWP published yesterday its guidance on the transitional protection, and also if sick since before the 21st of September guidance as well. So it's worth looking at. Going back to Richard's comment at the beginning, is how do organisations like SD Worx deal with this, or you as employers? Potentially, if someone has been back at work and not sick in the prior 56 days to the 6th of April, you don't really have a problem, because when they are next sick for one full day, the calculation of the average weekly earnings will be new. But for those that have been sick in that prior 56 days, you might need the original average weekly earnings value. And it could be that the solution you're on now wasn't the solution when they were sick. So that value needs to come from somewhere. Now, in relation, I talk about SD Worx, we'll work it out for you if we have the history. If we don't have the history, there isn't anything to work it out, but you can enter it. So you can tell us what the average weekly earnings was from the original, and we'll operate it for the 8% check. For many people, that'll be, they're entitled to £123.25 a week. But for that group up to £154 and 4p or 5p, whatever it is, it's actually 8% of their average weekly earnings, which will be less. So just be wary of that, but the ability to do it will be present in most payroll software, I should think. Sam, I think we could say we needed the detail for this a long time ago. In fairness, the DWP will probably say, but the Lords kept on saying no. But they weren't saying no about sickness. So I think they actually approved sickness in the first reading of the bill. They've been saying no to other Employment Rights Act changes, which meant that the department had to stay silent on it until the legislative process or the parliamentary process had completed. So we are caught a bit on the hop, but I think you'll find that most software has developed something, put it in place to handle this. The social media sort of traffic seems to predominantly be focusing on 0 hours workers, because suddenly they're entitled. Well, they're always entitled. It hasn't changed. I guess it was just you could get away with not paying it for 3 weeks, whereas now you can't. Yes, the rules on qualifying days hasn't changed. So who defines qualifying days? The employer does. And if the employer doesn't, then the law kicks in. And the law kicks in that there must be at least one. And if you haven't decided which day that one is, it's Wednesday. So if your 0 hours worker is sick on Wednesday, and even if they weren't scheduled to work, having to work has got no relevance. It's whether it's a qualifying day, they're entitled to a week's SSP. So just watch out. Can you change that so they could only get 1/5 of a week's SSP? You could, but then Monday to Friday would be qualifying days. And if they were sick on those days, they would be due 1/5 of the weekly SSP for each day. So the choice is with the employer on what they choose, but you can't choose 0. That's not an option within the regulations.
No, and you can't conveniently, as you say, you can't conveniently have qualifying days that just happen to be the hours or the days that employee is working that week if they work variable hours. I mean, I think for employers who haven't been clear on what their qualifying day patterns are, they might want to revisit them anyway, given the PIW and the waiting days are going. But if they operate 7 days a week, then arguably their employees could be required to work on any one of those 7 days a week. So, and they can have a 7 day a week qualifying day pattern, which they might decide is the right way for them to go. But either way, making sure that that's clear, making sure it's agreed, and obviously if it's in the staff handbook or the particulars of employment, there is you would assume that the agreement's there, because otherwise the employee wouldn't be there. But it has to be clearly communicated so that everybody understands that.
Shall we see if people are prepared?
I was going to say, it's time for the poll. I think it's perfect timing as well. So, because there's a huge amount of change here. So, how prepared are people for it? 100% prepared, bold, getting ready, haven't thought about it and not applicable. So if people can vote for this, that'd be great. It'd be good to hear what it's like out there for everyone. And just mindful, obviously, there's a lot being covered there. I'll just recap where we're going next, which is going through, once we've looked at the poll results, we're going through the pensions, changes in pensions, and then the EV hybrid cars. So I think we've covered quite a lot of the big stuff, but yes, the big one probably being sickness, guys. Do you think the biggest one today?
Yeah, and minimum wage as well. So I think sickness is the big change for April, isn't it? That's so close to us now.
Indeed, yeah.
I'm just seeing those folks coming in, and wow. Okay. I love the confidence of 100% prepared. I love that. that'll be me. It wouldn't be right, but and 70%, 76% getting ready, 9% haven't thought about it. I don't know what the 2 is, but yeah. So, do you think that 76% is because they're unable to be 100% prepared, or is there?
I don't know what everybody. Oh, sorry, Simon. I don't know what the other panelists think on this one, but I would assume that getting ready is reflective of the fact that that final guidance isn't out yet.
Yes.
So also software updates might not have come in yet. So whilst you may have had a conversation with your software developer to say you are going to be able to cope with these new changes to statutory sick pay, and they've said yes, until you actually see it in practice and how it's going to work through your payroll, I would imagine getting ready is probably an accurate reflection, but that's great for the 100%, that 13% who are 100% ready. So,
well done. Top of the class. So moving on because I'm mindful of time. We're on to, so we have the pensions latest and looking at the no change with the common threshold.
Yeah, this links to the question that was asked earlier. Are the automatic enrolment qualifying bands, are they still the same? And they are still the same. The reason given for there not being any change is so as not to conflict with the work of the newly formed Pensions Commission, who have been brought together to finish the job that was started 2 decades ago. That's the headline I'm quoting there. And to create finally a true pathway through to retirement from a pension perspective. Automatic enrolment is deemed to be a success. That was the work of the last pension commission. And so we're seeing more people saving for the pension than ever before. But statistics seem to suggest that actually pensioners who are saving now are going to be poorer than they've ever been in the past. So we are saving, yes. More of us are saving, yes, but are we saving enough? No. So, that's the work of the Pensions Commission, and that's the reason for no change to the threshold. But we can refer back to that fiscal drag again, because the earnings trigger is the same. If people's earnings are going up, then they are going to be captured, whereas previously they might not have been. And again, with those qualifying bands not changing, then if the earnings are going up beyond or into those thresholds, then they're going to be captured in a way that they maybe haven't been in the past.
So now there were private member bills which proposed changes, so there's an element of watch out, see what happens. The timing's not good for the government to introduce some of those private member bill results, which was in effect from £1 contributions and removing some of the wage bands. So they all continue. However, many of us don't have a lower threshold for pensions, so we actually already £1. And we may well open our company pension schemes to any age that wants to join within certain limits that aren't bound by auto-enrolment. So it's just those sorts of consideration. The other aspect, I guess, that's in the news is the pensions dashboard, which brings in the focus of all these little pension pots being able to be visibly seen by an individual is now in testing. So it is progressing so that for a number of the organisations, not all of them, it may be soon that people can actually see all their pots in one place. The area I think that we've got on there is on confusion on tax relief continues, is there's still around, and I think the figure from memory was about 12%. Andy, if he was on the call today, would probably say it was something else. The RTI returns that indicate to HMRC that the wrong tax relief method is being applied to pensions. It does continue. I see it constantly. Even got pension companies reminding people that their scheme is a net pay scheme because it's relief at source. The terminology is all backwards. It's not. So they don't even seem to understand the tax relief terminology. So it does continue. And so it's worthwhile reviewing because they're very expensive to resolve problems, because that means RTI files for prior years, people have received double tax relief, or they've been double taxed, one of the two. So it's an element of seeing. I'll get quickly, Steve, just in relation to what is happening with salary sacrifice. It's not today's problem, it's an April 29 problem. So that's when the limitation on salary sacrifice to £2,000, although the Lords voted a change, didn't they, this past week, was it, and have pushed it up to £5,000. I'm sure it's going to go 5-2, 5-2, 5-2. All right, it's 2.
Yeah, the government have already opposed those, haven't they? That was the 17th,
Yes.
a couple of days ago. The Lords, yeah, you're going to bless them, wanted to put that threshold up to the 5,000 from the £2,000 limit that's going to come in from April 2029, but only on it's only going to limit the Class 1 NIC savings. It won't affect income tax relief that we currently enjoy because it's very generous. And again, I'm quoting some of the headlines that came out with the news about this. So yes, it's going to be bouncing backward and forward in a similar way to the Employment Rights Act. Hopefully it won't go on as long, and we will be clear on what we need to do where we have a salary sacrifice in operation from April 2029.
And the hereditaries are going to go soon, so maybe the government feel it'll be easier in the future. I don't know.
Thank you, guys. So moving on to the final section, EV and hybrid cars, unless we've covered everything on pensions. Say that again, Richard.
Yeah, sure.
My favourite subjects.
Your favourite subject, your specialist subject. So start
Too
with
much
pensions.
work on this subject for too many people, but I'll let somebody else start, and then I'll.
Well, it's been generating a lot. So yeah, okay. So understanding the sacrifice.
So I think it's part of this discussion we were having the other week, Simon and myself and Sam, is understanding what the scheme actually means is the key. Principally, the saving is reducing on the grounds that until 28-29, we're going to see a percentage increase across the board on EV cars. The majority of these cars are EV rather than hybrids, purely because of the VAT that the employer usually saves on them. But I think I'll let Simon crack on with the whole area of understanding the benefits.
Yeah, it's a common area, and there is a lot of myth or misconception on how these schemes work and how they operate. Sometimes I think generated from the sales pitch, because the seller probably doesn't understand the implications of salary sacrifice. No, nobody can buy a car pre-tax and pre-NI. Let's get the fact out there. You can't. If you're buying a car, it's after tax and after national insurance, not before. There's lots of conversations I have with people on EV cars telling me they're not company cars. Taxation wise, they are a company car. So I see it that some employers operate the sacrifice, but they don't apply the company car tax because they're convinced there isn't one. There is. And equally, they want to offset the benefit charge against the capital contribution they've collected via salary sacrifice. There is no capital contribution via salary sacrifice. That would be unlawful avoidance. Any offset of capital contributions would be after tax and after national insurance. So there is heavy misunderstandings on these schemes that we need to be assured of knowing that, all right, you may be paying a lease of £500 as an employer. No, the employee is paying it via salary sacrifice. The employer is paying it. The salary sacrifice is a payment from the individual or a reduction cut in pay to money that the employer is keeping, and the employee doesn't pay tax and national insurance on that cut in pay. It's a pay cut. The employer is meeting the cost of the lease. The employee is not. And while it's got nothing to do with us, it's cost neutral to us as an employer. It's not a company car. It is a company car. So it falls under taxation as company car. So there needs to be a collection of the tax on the company car benefit and Class 1A. Now, the saving in Class 1 secondary NI might wipe off the cost of the Class 1A, so the employer has gained. It is a company car. So just be aware of that. The other aspect, as some people thought, is, well, the taxation, company car tax on an EV company car is zero. Well, it used to be, but it hasn't been for some time. So it was introduced. Currently, the EV car company car tax for 25-26 is 3% of the list price of the car or plus accessories. That will rise 33.3 recurring percent on April the 6th to 4%. And as Rich has already indicated, 5% the year after. And then I think it jumps 2 percentage points, doesn't it, from memory?
Let's talk about 28, 29 separately, because the electric car is the easiest bit of all of it. I think just to follow on from what Simon said as well is, and I've heard it several times, people are trying to, I guess, avoid the fact that the sacrifice will offset the national minimum wage. So remember, you have to remove all sacrifices from salary, from your notional salary payments prior to the calculation of national minimum wage. What this does with the EV scheme is it obviously minimises the actual effective audience for it, because, you know, how much is the lease going to be? You know, you're looking £400, £500, £600, £800 a month of lease, which would be sacrificed. And do you have staff with that level of remuneration to be able to take that into account with that calculation, when they could also have pension? They might even still have childcare vouchers and various other aspects that, when accumulated together, actually make up such a substantial part of their pay that they'll fail national minimum wage, and they will. The other side is you cannot hide it. So I'm going to give you an example, and it's a real one, and Simon knows it because we discussed it before. Paying a car allowance, or paying a car allowance and giving the employee the option to join the EV scheme and use the car allowance to pay it. Therefore, their view might well be, well, the salary sacrifice offsets against the car allowance, and therefore it won't affect the national minimum wage calculation. Well, that is an absolute no, because the principle is the national minimum wage calculation is done on all sacrifices against national minimum wage pay items, and allowances aren't. So I've heard this twice now, and it's just something that must be considered. There's too many people trying to create loopholes to add the value to these schemes which don't exist. Sorry, I'll get off my high horse now.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes. And they're probably part of the 157 employers named and shamed for reductions and deductions, etc., that don't work. And quite often here, and you know, it's one of my favourite hobby horses, nothing to do with EV cars. Well, if I flip it to a deduction, that'll make it all better. It won't, because if they're paying for a company car off you, that also, after tax and after national insurance, that also reduces national minimum wage pay. So flipping it from a sacrifice to a deduction makes no difference. It's still a company car. It's still for the benefit of the employer. You're under national minimum wage, potentially. Make no change. And I think that's why people are being caught out. So it's go in with your eyes open. And then there are maternity rights and parental leave rights as well. So during maternity leave, a lady, a mother, would be entitled to the car, and there is nothing to sacrifice from statutory maternity pay because that's not a contractual payment. So who funds that during that time? The employer does, or the car scheme does. Someone has to decide to. The employee doesn't, because that would be unlawful. Potential maternity discrimination. So it's just watch out for these things. Am I a proponent of EV and hybrid car usage? Of course I am. But I think there's an element of only for those that can afford to do it, really. And there are reporting complexities because as it's a company car, on your FPS submission, if you're payrolling, you have to report the car details. And there are so many I see where it's not being done correctly. So even though they might be payrolling the benefit correctly, they're not reporting the car correctly. Change points and things like that, and the calculations. But I think that's why we brought this one up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's other aspects as well, especially with mandatory payrolling of benefits. Using your woman on maternity scenario, there are two separate things, as Simon quite rightly said. There is the sacrifice element and the company car element. You are going to lose effectively the deduction from the employee's pay for the sacrifice, but you're still reporting the car. And with mandatory payrolling, you're meant to be payrolling through the payroll where there's no salary. So all of a sudden, you're going to end up with a tax bill at the end of the year, whatever. So that's going to be quite an interesting one to communicate. And I guess the other thing on here, which I did sort of detract from, was the 28-29 change. And that's now very, very important. If people are getting electric or company cars from April, the lease is usually going to be 3 years, which means that car is going to be transitioning into the new scheme. And the new scheme is dramatically different to the one we have today. So as Simon quite rightly said, we go 3, 4, 5 for the EV cars up to 26, 27, 27, 28. But 28, 29, it goes up by 2%. To 7%, and the year after goes up another 2% to 9%, which means the government are transitioning that cost from normal fuel cars over to electric. But probably the bigger one is hybrid. So up to 27, 28. Obviously, most people will be aware that hybrid cars are based on their value of mileage on their electric battery, which means they can be very, very cheap still. So a good example could be a car that does over 150 miles, I think it is, on its battery, is still only 5%. Well, from 28, 29, that vanishes altogether. So all all hybrids will be 18%. Okay, whether the distance they go on their battery will not matter whatsoever. So these are fairly massive changes, and that's not even to add fossil fuel cars, which are all going to go up as well. But realistically, by then, nobody will have them on this. Just understanding the impact long term on company cars, whether they be EV or hybrid. It's going to be quite dramatic, and the savings, therefore, are going to be vastly lost going forward. So
we've got a few questions coming in on this, but you responding on that, Simon? Yeah. Yes, it's obviously a hot topic. Thank you, guys. There's obviously loads on this one right at the end, but there's a ton been covered, so I really, really appreciate it. As they say, it never stands still, does it? Before we wrap up, I just wanted to highlight again the SD Worx payroll legislation guide, the companion for this webinar today. So thank you for that, Simon, as well. I believe that's your expertise and guidance on that one there. You can just click on the link, download that. As I said at the top, there's the slides will be sent out and it's all been recorded, so everything is there for you, and you just click on that and download that as well. So big thank you to our panel. As always, thank you so much. There's so much more. We could keep going for another half hour, an hour, don't you think? So really, really appreciate that. And thank you for everyone who's joined. Thank you for the people on the poll. I thought that was very interesting. And we look forward to seeing you in the next edition of Payroll Question Time, which will be in the new financial year. So see you all soon. And thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.